Hello, and welcome to the 5th episode of Jank Brews Weekly. This is a weekly series where I go through the formats that I enjoy, posting a deck that is not necessarily competitive but should be a lot of fun to play. And this week we're going into the new standard after Guilds of Ravnica rotation. Technically it doesn't start until next week or this Friday, but I went ahead and made a deck that's rotation proof already, and honestly this one is looking like a lot of fun. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm planning on definitely sleeving this deck up soon, and that is Azor's Fireballs. Now the deck is pretty, honestly. I like the color scheme of this a lot. It's going to be $211 in paper, and it's a lot of fun. And so the reason why the deck is called Azor's Fireballs is for two key cards, and that's going to be Azor's Gateway, which we have as a 4 of, which normally when you see Legendary you don't think that you're going to be running it as a 4 of, but this card you can do that because you can loot away extra copies of Azor's Gateway to itself. And the flip side, you gain X mana for X being your life total. Combos really well with another card that was recently printed in M19 called Banefire. This card, X red, you can deal X damage to any target, and if X is greater than 5, the spell can't be countered, which is very relevant because there's a lot of control running around in pretty much every format, but Standard is definitely going to be seeing a lot more control with the introduction of a lot of really juicy cards from the Izzet and Dimir guilds. And so being uncounterable and the damage can't be prevented is actually pretty relevant, as this card is pretty much our only finisher. And so how are we going to be able to survive? How are we going to get to the point where we can flip our Azor's Gateway? And well, there's a part of the deck that synergizes well both with Azor's Gateway and with the staying alive part, and that is, of course, life gain. We have 4 copies of Fountain of Renewal. This card is awesome. You can put it down on turn 1 and it just incidentally gains you life. It's your best turn 1 play against aggro, and your best turn 1 play in general. And not only will it gain you life, which is useful for Azor's Gateway, but then you can also sacrifice it later to draw a card if you need to find something to loot away, or just simply you need to get gas. And so it's never a dead card. Revitalize as well. It's pretty straightforward. It's a gain 3 life, but it also cantrips, which is really relevant because it helps you keep moving through your deck. Lastly, Gift of Paradise gains you life and helps you ramp witch. In case you're unable to flip your Azor's Gateway for whatever reason, getting more mana out on the battlefield should still allow you to give a big Banefire and shoot it at your opponent's face. One thing I forgot to mention in the earlier slide is that not Azor's Gateway, Banefire is actually really good against control, not only because it's uncounterable, but because it targets anything, and so it can take out Teferi, which is going to primarily be the big scary win condition that we need to look out for. So besides the life gain, there's a ton of removal. 2 copies of Seal Away, 2 copies of Ixalan's Binding. There's 2 more copies of Seal Away and 2 more copies of Ixalan Binding in the sideboard, which I was told by somebody that they would recommend to put all 4 Seal Aways in the main deck and have Ixalan's Binding in the sideboard, but we want to have cards with different converted mana costs in the main deck because of the way Azor's Gateway works. In order to flip, it does need to have 5 different converted mana costs under it, and in order to do that, we need to have a higher variety. One thing to note is that lands do count as 0 cost, so if you put a land under it, then you only need to have 4 more different CMCs. Besides that, for big board decks, the ones that are going to have either really big creatures or just lots of them, Settle the Wreckage and Cleansing Nova are both really effective at taking those out, and I feel like Cleansing Nova is currently underplayed just because it was overshadowed by Fumigate being a significantly better option, but now that Fumigate is out of the format, I think Cleansing Nova is going to see a lot more play. Lastly in the deck, we have a couple of creatures. These are the only creatures in the deck, and they're both really, really good. Knight of Autumn is amazing. It gives you so much flexibility, and worst case scenario, it gains you life, which can then help with Azor's Gateway. And Evra is a secondary win condition. You're probably never going to win with Evra because since you don't have any other creatures, your opponents are going to have removal in their hand that they haven't used, and they're going to kill Evra with it. But in case that there is a matchup or a situation where you can't use Banefire, but you have enough life that you could swing in for a lethal Evra, that's why it's there. It's a secondary win condition just in case. And it also has a CMC of 6, so it helps us flip Azor's Gateway a little better. Besides that, in the sideboard, the mana base. Mana base, we got a huge bonus for the mana bases for pretty much every deck, thanks to the reprinting of the Shock lands. Those are the Sacred Foundry, Temple Garden, and a few others from the other guilds from this set. The fact that they have the basic land types and can come in untapped if you need them to creates a lot more flexibility with what you're doing. There's also not that many things to be afraid of in the standard format for having dual lands such as Blood Moon, so you can really lower the number of basic lands that you're running and have the best fixing possible. I do still run a high number of basics just because there are a lot of Fields of Ruin and also budget reasons. So this is pretty flexible. You could probably have 4 of Foundry, 4 of Garden, and lower a couple of Plains and Forests, but either way, this is a really easy mana base to build now. Naya is really easy, Sultai, all of those that got 2 guilds essentially in this set have really good mana bases right now. And so now we move on to the sideboard, and this is for when you're playing against either really aggressive decks, or alternatively you're playing against a very heavy control deck that is probably going to be sideboarding out all of their removal. You're going to side in 4 copies of Ajani's Pridemate. This thing can get really big. If you go turn 1 Fountain of Renewal, turn 2 Ajani's Pridemate, it's just always getting bigger every turn, and you have so many ways to gain life that it's just, there's never anything that could go wrong with having an Ajani's Pridemate. But it's not in the main deck because it doesn't directly affect the combo. And the Sealaways, Ixalan's Bindings, this is just in case, now that you know that what your opponent's doing, you can take out one or the other to have the full playset if you really need to have more efficient or more effective removal, essentially. And lastly, just a few more copies of Knight of Autumn in case our opponent has a lot of artifacts or enchantments, or again we just need more creatures on the ground. Deathgorge Scavenger, there's probably going to be a lot of graveyard synergies in the format, and Deathgorge Scavenger has the added bonus of gaining us life as well. And lastly, Carnage Tyrant is just there for siding in against control because they will have a very hard time beating this card if they don't have a board wipe. And so there you have it. That's Azor's Fireballs. It's a pretty straightforward deck. There's not that much complexity to it, and the game plan is just loot through the deck using Azor's Gateway, find your Banefire, flip the Gateway, shoot your opponent in the face. While I said I haven't been running this deck in paper, I have tried to play it on Magic Arena. I was missing a few very important parts, and so it wasn't that effective, but I have been able to, on a couple of occasions, use a Banefire for 50 plus. And so that's something that you can look forward to. Your opponents will definitely have a smile on their face after playing against this deck. It's a very goofy way to win, because you are basically not doing anything until you flip the Gateway. And so, yeah, if you guys have any feedback, any ideas for how to make the deck better, and any experiences that you have playing this deck at FNM, I'd love to hear them. And besides that, thank you very much again for watching, and I'll see you again next week for Modern.